Hello and welcome, my name is the Finest Answer, this is Battlefield 1, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the second Battlefield 1 expansion in the name of the Tsar. Now you may be wondering, this expansion has been out for what, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even close to a month at this point. Why are we still talking about this? I'm not even playing Battlefield 1 anymore at this stage. Well, first of all, this video should have come out earlier. I just didn't get around to it because of weapon reviews and of Star Wars Battlefront 2's public beta. Other than that, I still think it's interesting and important to talk about the Battlefield 1 DLC because it is an indication of where Battlefield 1 is going, and if it doesn't essentially get stopped or criticized enough at this point, the developers aren't going to end up getting the message, and we're going to be stuck with subpar Battlefield 1 content, not just for the remainder of Battlefield 1, but going into future Battlefield titles. Lastly, of course, it's also a little bit of a therapeutic exercise. Lets me build off some steam, get rid of some rage, some salt that I have built up from playing this DLC. Just briefly, because it is so obvious, is the technical difficulties that came with the DLC. I mean, what the fucking hell was DICE doing? I don't know how they managed to screw it up so badly with the absolutely unplayable server lags that would come up with the reintroduction of bugs that were very rare suddenly becoming very frequent. The most annoying of those, and the one that I experienced most frequently, is the constant taking damage animation bug, for lack of a better word, essentially where your character is constantly flinching because basically your client thinks you're taking damage. You're not taking damage. There is no indication that you're taking damage either, but your character just continuously flinches and flinches and flinches, resulting in you killing yourself because it's so frustrating to try and play with a character that's just flinching all over the place. That aside, we move on then to weapons, and there's kind of 3 categories here. There's, talking about the weapons and the weapon design themselves, those being 2 of them, and then there's the unlock requirements, so actually getting the weapons. Well, most of the unlock requirement or parts of the unlock requirements are fine. Get X, Y, Z kills with this and that weapon. The weapons may be frustrating to use, or you may be using silly variants of weapons, but, it's doable. There was often second parts of unlock requirements that were just stupid in the way they were designed. So you had, 15 kills with tripwires, 20 mortar kills, 30 rifle grenade kills, 5 AT rocket gun kills. Note here, these are not vehicle destroyed with AT rockets, but AT rocket gun kills, meaning they were being used or still are used against infantry. AT grenade kills, same thing there, not vehicle destroys, but kills. So they're being used against infantry instead of against vehicles. All in all, just encouraging one of the worst parts of Battlefield 1, grenade and gadget spam, 2 things that nobody in Battlefield 1 could get enough of. Things we were desperately asking DICE to make sure players engage in more. I mean, I could have done it better myself. 30 rifle grenade kills? I mean, really? I mean, that gadget is literally the anti-team play gadget in Battlefield 1 because it means you're giving up your syringe essentially. I mean, you could give up health, but you'd be stupid to do so. You're giving up your syringe, your ability to revive teammates in order to spam some more grenades downrange. I mean, wow, I wonder who was thinking of this. I wonder who in the office at DICE's headquarters or wherever they're developing or were developing this DLC came up with that idea and went, yeah, that's a solid way of improving the experience of any given player on the battlefield. Tip of the hat. Fantastic 101 perfect execution. Talking about the actual weapons themselves, you have weapons like the M19000 factory and slug variant, which is a great addition to the game, fills a gap, essentially gives the assault class a semi kind of skill cannon in the shotgun department because of the low amount of shots available to you. Great weapon, extremely satisfying to use, not overpowered but powerful enough to give it a place in the shotgun lineup. Great execution, great job. You have weapons like the Parabellum, which are also great. Needs a slight nerf because of the bipod's just too powerful. But other than that, fit in well, are great weapons, very enjoyable to use. Then you have weapons like, the General Louis and the Fedorov Automat, which are decent weapons. They're not extremely good, but not every weapon that comes with a DLC is going to be kind of the new best weapon in the class or fill one certain niche perfectly. So that's fine there. Scout weaponry seems to be alright. Haven't experimented too much with it. Most of them are iron sight sniper rifles, so I'm not a big fan of that. So personally, not going to get too much enjoyment out of them. But for those who do like sniping with iron sights, they will likely have plentiful enjoyments with those weapons. Then, of course, you've got some of the other weapons available, like the SMG 0818, which is essentially the poster child of stupid and bad weapon design, or even the Perigno, I believe it is M1908. Something like that, which I'll be doing a review on Monday, so we won't be going into too much details there. Focusing then on the SMG 0818, for example. I mean, just the sheer idiocracy of designing an SMG that's designed for long range, but maintaining the standard SMG traits of a spread model that will not allow an SMG to actually hit something at long range, and a damage model that means if an SMG were to hit something at long range for some reason, by probably sheer luck or just shooting an infinite amount of bullets downrange until eventually one does actually hit, you're getting absolutely no damage because the damage model is just so poor. I'm just not quite sure how they managed to design this weapon and go afterwards and say, yeah, this is a good addition to the game. This is balanced well. This is going to be enjoyable. It is, with the M1903 Experimental, the worst primary weapon in Battlefield 1. I'm pretty sure of it at this point. So that pretty much sums up the good, the bad, and the stupid. There being plenty of stupid when it comes to the weapon design of the In the Name of the Tsar DLC. Vehicles is a small note in today's video because I just haven't experienced too much with the actual In the Name of the Tsar vehicles. Not a bomber pilot personally, still working on that. Hopefully eventually we'll do a guide on bombers and we'll then be able to talk about it a little bit more. Seems a solid addition, however the tank seems absolutely rubbish. I personally haven't been able to use it to any great effectiveness. Always would take an artillery truck over it. Haven't seen other people use it very effectively. Seems to just absolutely get nuked every time it rolls out of deployment. The second part of any good DLC, however, after weaponry, is good map design. And this is where we can get into a little bit more detail, because map design, in my opinion, is probably the worst part of the In the Name of the Tsar DLC, and is just an epitome of laziness and a lack of knowledge of what Battlefield 1 needs and what the player base wants. Furthermore, it's just an illustration of how little DICE does actually, in certain instances at least, seem to care about community feedback, because they got a lot of community feedback as to certain maps in their raster, as to how they desperately need improving in this and that way. Good suggestions from the community members taking significant portions of time to write up clear structured arguments and posts, say on the CTE Reddit forums, to allow the developers to really see where they were coming from, why their point was so important, and, you know, getting support from the community and a kind of a clear opinion crystallizing from the community, and DICE just going, you know what, we don't care. We're not going to actually change this. Technically, we only promised you, 4 maps. We never promised you they were actually going to be good maps or maps that you were going to actually enjoy to play on. Down that line, before we get into specific maps, and there's only so much I'm going to be able to say at this point about those maps, because I'm not doing a map review on every single one of these maps in this video. What makes a good map, just to kind of contrast it to what we have available, and this is to a certain extent subjective, because everybody prefers different kinds of maps, has a different personal playstyle, and that affects how you see map design. But there is some unifying, some overall concepts that generally in shooters, specifically Battlefield 1, of course, make for good maps. Now, the first one, and like the more controversial one in this video, is limited pathing. Now, by limited pathing, I do not mean you have to have a map like Argonne Forest or Prés d'État Ur, which is, very, very limited in where you can go. There's 3 or 4 paths you can take, and that's it, and they're very small, narrow paths, so enemy movement is essentially absolutely 100% predictable. No, I don't mean that, but you have to have a limited amount of pathing. You don't want players being able to come from absolutely every point, every area of the map at the same time. This means both physically arriving at your doorstep and killing you with an automatico, or being sniped across the entire map, because essentially there's positions which oversee the entirety of the map, and from which point scouts will just rule the entire map. That point, of course, being extremely relevant to this DLC and the map design that we had there. Equally important for a good map is varying engagement distances and cover and pathing that allows for all classes to shine. So this means you want a map which has plentiful cover. That's obvious, so that, for example, an assault player can choose to move up on a target to get into his ideal engagement distance. You also want a map that allows, for example, a scout class to be ideally placed, ideally situated to make use of their weapon at its ideal engagement distance. And this is really for every single class. And the way you achieve this is by having enough cover so that classes can move up on each other, can close or also widen the gap, and by having extensively balanced different areas of the maps where engagement distances are different. So you don't just want the objectives to be absolutely 100% close quarter and everything else to be blatantly open for the scout player to dominate. In that area between, for example, said close quarter objectives and the next focused close quarter objective, you're going to want to have some cover to allow for some medium range play, and you're going to want to have some areas that are open for the scout so that you have some long range play. But the way it's set up in this DLC, generally in Battlefield 1 on many maps sadly, is just extreme automatical style and shotgun style close quarters on the actual objective, and from that point onwards absolute, unequivocal long range where clearly the scout 9 out of 10 times is the best class choice for engaging in other players. You're not being necessarily useful in helping your team win, and you're going to be causing a lot of frustration, and in many cases these scouts are not even getting very many kills. But technically, at least, the best choice, and that's why they're running that class, is the scout class. Now, another point about good map design, and the last or the third that I'm naming here, is the right number of objectives. If you design your map massive, if you make your map too large, it's either going to have to be an absolute vehicle focused map, which is, you know, some people like, some people don't, that's absolutely fine, or it's going to have to be a map where the objectives are very close. You have to have a limited number of objectives as to allow for varied combat, moving around the map, no kind of spawn trapping or absolute just hard capping and focusing of combat on just one area of the map. That's what happens when your map is too linear, or there is too little objectives, or both. But as said, you don't want too many objectives because players are just going to be running around in circles after objectives that have been captured by enemies, but where the enemy team is no longer on them. There's no incentive to defend. The best way to win a game is by just running around and capturing unoccupied objectives. The enemy team is not going to be able to get there in time because the map is too big. That out of the way then, how do the DLC maps from the In the Name of the Tsar DLC compare to this rather crude criteria to make a good map? Well, you've got Tsaritzen, which has too little objectives and leads to absolute base rapes if there's a stronger team on one side, because they'll just push you into your base and you won't be able to get out no matter how good of a team you have, no matter how good of a player you are. There's no way you're getting out of that base camp situation. Furthermore, they've got the one central objective, which is so defensively focused, so easy to defend, that the team that takes it initially will hold it for at least 3 to 4 to 500 tickets, half the game, before they lose it to a very concentrated enemy push. The only way they're actually losing that is because the enemy, the one defending the objective, becomes tired of sitting around on the objective, mowing down people from positions of absolute power within the structure, that B objective. I mean, Tsaritzen is the poster child of this is not going to work in reality, DICE. This is how you need to improve it. This is how we suggest you improve it, being said on the CTE. And DICE going, you know, nah, we won't. We'll just kind of leave it the way it is. And consequently, as the community predicted and experienced already in the CTE, it's absolutely shit. Albion is the next map on our list now. I give this map to a certain degree a pass. It's an absolute sniper-focused hell, but it's a vehicle-centric map, really. It reminds me of Goldman Railway, and it's fine to have occasionally a map like that in there. It's still just not really enjoyable because it's just, unless you really like sniping and that's all you're going to want to do, or you're going to want to be a vehicle person, this map is just not for you. I personally don't enjoy it. However, I do see that we need occasionally a map like this, and having such a great, huge map is good for advertisement purposes as well. I mean, the map looks absolutely fantastic, just doesn't play as fantastic as you may think. Galicia is the poster child for the worst map in Battlefield 1's history. It's definitely a candidate for the worst map in Battlefield's history. Now, I haven't been playing Battlefield since the first Battlefield game, so I'm not qualified to make that statement. But comparing it to Battlefield 4, this is probably the worst map. It's certainly the worst map in Battlefield 1. I can guarantee you that. It takes the spot over from a couple of very prominent maps that held that spot previously. I mean, we're talking here maps like Far Fortress and Conquest or Operations, or maps like Soissons for Conquest and Operations, which were previously kind of rivaling each other for who has, you know, the worst map, the worst combat. Galicia has just blown them all out of the water. It's the laziest attempt at map design I've seen in Battlefield 1 as well. It's basically a flat plain with a couple of trenches, a couple of holes to hide in. There's 4 players that can play on this map, 4 types of players. The scout player, who likes playing against other scouts at extreme long ranges, even for scout play. We're talking 150 to 250 meters minimum requirement to be engaging. You're not going to be engaging a scout on this map at under 100 meters in most scenarios, sadly. So if you're a Martini Henry user, forget it. If you're an SMLE user, forget it. You really need to be one of those people who prefers the Gewehr 98 sniper or the M1903 sniper, for example. Those are the weapons that will shine on this map. You have the armored train driver, or player who likes to use behemoths. They're welcome on this map. The artillery truck, also welcome on this map. And last, of course, but certainly not least, the pilot who likes farming infantry or getting fucked by AAs across the entire map, because there is no way you're escaping from an active AA on this map, unless by an absolute miracle, because there's no way you can like dodge and weave behind any kind of cover or structure to prevent the AA from continuing to shoot at you, as you could, for example, on a map like Monte Grappa, where you can, you know, try and get behind the mountains, or on other maps which offer kind of similar structures for pilots to take advantage of. I'm not complaining about the pilots getting shot out of the sky. I'm just saying there's 4 kinds of players that can play on this map. If you like to play as medic, if you like to play as support, as assault, you like to play any kind of medium close quarters, medium long range, anything but extreme long range, you're not going to be welcome on this map whatsoever. Lubkau Pass is actually the best map in the DLC, in my opinion. It's not a great map. It's quite heavily long range focused, lots of sniper play, lots of bipod play, but it's at a ratio where I'd say I could still play the map without just being so angry at the developers while playing it that I'd have to quit out of it. So it is heavily scout focused, but there's enough close quarter medium range for a support player, medic player to also find some enjoyment in the map. It's also in a fantastically looking map as well, which does help to a certain extent. We have then, of course, Brusilov Keep and Volga River still remaining. Brusilov Keep, scout hell. Basically, each team takes a position on either side of the river and just snipes each other from that position. You can get into some close quarters, but essentially it's every time it's a suicide mission where you're just going to get absolutely wrecked by a sniper as soon as you duck out of one of the few houses that you can hide in. Volga River, it is the second best map in the DLC if you don't account for Albion, which personally I don't like, but I do see as, you know, a valid map for other people to play who do like that kind of map. It's very scout heavy once more. There's a huge amount of long range, but there is a little bit more cover so that if you're going to play long range medic at least, you could also be relatively effective. Also, most points on the map are actually accessible and there isn't so much of a clusterfuck experience as you get on Brusilov Keep or Tsaritsyn, which is at least a positive note to make. That really wraps it up for the maps and really for this DLC review, rant, whatever you really want to call it. I'd love to hear your opinions on this DLC, on the direction DICE is taking Battlefield 1's design when it comes to weaponry, but more importantly, personally for me, is the direction they take regarding map design. So hit me up with them down below in the comments, your experiences, your opinions, or of course on Twitter. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and of course hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.